Add to the stream. Hey guys, we're getting ready. I'm on early, making sure I start at 8 o'clock and I am done by 9 o'clock. So we just setting everything up. Yeah. So you always know that this has a 5 second delay, but as long as I can get to your questions, I definitely will. Yeah, it's a 5 second delay. So we just getting ready. I ain't nervous because I already know this stuff, but I am ready to do this. A. Okay. So we're gonna get started here in about 2 minutes. Whether you're watching now or you're watching later or tomorrow when you wake up, you too sleepy, maybe you wake up late. I don't know. As long as you watch this within the week, because you are going to have some homework. So y'all see, I already got my little mic set up, or whatever the case may be. So tonight's lesson, as you can see, let's see, is this kind of testing? 1, 2, 3. Oh, this gotta be turned down. Yo, laptop over here. All right, I can't hear myself, y'all, because we got a whole production studio going up. So it is 7:59. We are getting ready, y'all. I have literally been completely intertwined in podcasting, notes, how I'm gonna do it, because I could teach you how to podcast in one day, actually. But we are gonna take our time with this. I plan to have everybody up and running with their own podcast before March 1st. So I'm going to teach you for 4 weeks straight, every Saturday night, 8 o'clock, right here in the group. You can watch the replays all week. So even if somebody is late joining the group, they can just, you know, watch the replay videos. I'm also going to be dropping little mini quick tutorials throughout the week, whether it's how to create an icon, how to edit audio, whatever the case may be. I'm going to drop those mini nuggets throughout the week so you guys will be able to see that there. So it is exactly 8 o'clock on a dot. So we're going to wait till we see some people come in, at least one person. Like I said before, I'm probably gonna even end up putting this on my YouTube channel too. So we're just gonna wait till a few more people come in. I wish I had some hype music. I would play Let It Go. But you know how Facebook and they copyright is. They do not play about their copyright. So let me just check my notes real quick. Make sure everything is up and live. They do not. Yep, it's up and live. About their copyright. So let me. Okay. Just make sure I can see myself. So let me just check. Okay. All right. Cause some people be late. So I'm gonna just give y'all a little bit of time. Play some music. Let me play some music on my iPod. It gotta be some it gotta be some free music. But anyway, guys, get ready tonight. Hope you guys have your notepads together, or maybe you have your notes on your phone. You want to go ahead and open that up. Whatever the case may be, I'm gonna just jump right into it. So if you are here, it is because you want to start a podcast. You want to start creating a podcast, and you just it's so much information out there. You really don't know where to get it started, or how to start, where to start. And 9 times out of 10, you probably have a syndrome, and I like to call a lot of people out this syndrome, where they don't start a podcast or they don't start a YouTube page until they have every single little tiny thing done and complete. Oh, I gotta wait till I get an icon. Oh, I gotta wait till I get a logo made. Oh, I gotta wait till I get a website made. You don't need to do any of that stuff when it comes to creating a podcast. You just need to get it done. And all those things that you're telling yourself what you need to do before getting your podcast done is just you self sabotaging yourself. Yes, it really is. So if you know what you know, you can start your podcast on exactly that. So We're gonna go ahead and get it right started. It is 8:02. Again, you come in late, no problem. At the end of this segment, we are going to have a question and answer thing. So I'm just going to go straight through everything. As you guys seen earlier, I actually dropped a complete 4 week syllabus to everything I'm going to be teaching everybody for the next 4 weeks. Everything is going to be pre-recorded, and again, I'll redrop videos and redrop replays throughout the time. So, first things first, why should you have a podcast, and what exactly is the purpose of a podcast? Well, I've been having to go back and forth with people all week. Actually, I had to go back and forth with a guy the other day who tried to tell me that his thing was a podcast, but he created a video show on Facebook that was only available and recorded in his private Facebook group. I'm like, that's not a podcast, sir. So, before I explain to you exactly what a podcast is, it is very important that people understand that there is a difference between a podcast and then you recording video while you have your microphone. I am not recording a podcast right now. I am recording a video cast, and I could put that on YouTube or Vimeo or post the video on Instagram, but it is not a podcast. The only thing that is a podcast, the only thing that goes and is uploaded onto a podcast hosting site is the audio portion. You record videos if, let's say, you already have a platform on YouTube, you record videos. Maybe you want that to be part of what your YouTube channel is, but you're not getting paid for that. YouTube doesn't have a distribution of RSS feed, so therefore, YouTube is not a place for your podcast. So if you know somebody who got a podcast and they say, yeah, it's on YouTube, girl, it's on YouTube, they playing themselves. That ain't where it's supposed to be. Okay, you use video just to promote a podcast. You don't actually use video to create a podcast unless you're going to be using it for promotional snippets. So basically, a podcast is the technical definition is a podcast is a digital audio file that is basically made available on the internet. So you can download it from a computer, you could download it from your cell phone or whatever, and you basically can take it with you. That's what makes it different from the radio. When you listen to the radio, you have to listen to it right then and there while it's on. But a podcast, you can take it with you anywhere you go. You can use it anywhere you go. It's your thing. It's just you. If somebody can report a podcast episode today and you ain't gotta listen to it until next week if you don't want to, if you don't feel like it. And unlike other things that's recorded on the video online, like I don't know, TV shows, or maybe you listening to, music, whatever, and your favorite song go off. A podcast, one, it's 100% free. You don't have to sign up for it. You just subscribe to it. Maybe follow the people you subscribe to. Maybe follow them on Instagram. But it's completely free to listen to. But the ultimate best part about podcasting is you could clean up your house, you could clean up your car, you could do all the things you need to get through for the whole day. You just do everything you need to do while just playing a podcast in the background. I like to say podcast is basically like a soundtrack to your life. You can go to sleep listening to it, depending on the type of podcast it is. You can go to sleep listening to it, or whatever the case may be. So, the name podcast actually came from the words iPod from Apple, of course, and broadcast. So it's basically a mashup of that word. Now, the average podcast is only about no more than an hour, but no less than 5 minutes. And I say that because sometimes people will create, if you see that I shared earlier this week, sometimes people will create a podcast. Maybe it's a 5 minute Wednesday or a top five podcast or something like that, where they only want to do I don't know, a news summary for 5 minutes. That's when you make it like a really short podcast. And usually it would never be over 45 minutes unless it's a like very deep, long story storytelling podcasts. Like, for instance, a lot of the murder podcasts, because I love me a murder podcast. Don't ask why, y'all. I ain't crazy. But I love those unsolved murder podcasts. And those are usually always 45 minutes. They include voiceover artists, they include the host, they include a little bit of music. I'm sure they got multiple lines of audio on those things, including a time that they also spend doing ads for those podcasts. But they're 45 minutes and they're worth the 45 minutes, or sometimes longer. So if you ever want to do anything like that, that is what the 45 minutes for. But for the case of this and becoming a beginner, I would say you can create your podcast for however long you want to create it for. But if you really want to get those listeners, it's important to know that the average podcast is only listened to for anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. And I got that from online, but I also got that from my own statistics of my own like podcast platform. I've had hundreds of downloads, hundreds of views or listens or whatever the case may be. But the average actual minute that people listen to podcasts is usually anywhere from 20 to 30 minutes. And that's if it's good or y'all really talking about something good or something like that, or whatever the case may be. So we are only 10 minutes in. See how many viewers we got. Any viewers? All right. So, and that's probably me on my phone. Okay. So, first things first. After we talk about the length and we talk about your why and your what, the main reason why you want to start a podcast is because it's going to help you let your voice be heard. You know, it's only so many times you can update a Facebook status for people to know how you feel. And we already know that the Facebook algorithm is only showing what you got to say to maybe 10% of the people that's on your friends list. This is not how that works when it comes to podcasts. Somebody is going to hear what you got to say, whether it's right here in the US of A or if it's down in Puerto Rico, Italy. I mean, they listen to a podcast over in China. You never know, but it is a great way to let your voice be heard. If you have a business, a small business, it's very important for you to maybe start a podcast if you have a small business. So you can, let's say, for example, I've used this as example before. Let's say if I was a person who's, for example, I use one of my friends, for example. So let's say if you sold body butters and massage oils and lotions or stuff like that, then I will create a podcast that's all about self care. You know, I will talk about multiple different types of self care topics. I will have guests occasionally on my show that might work in a self care space or talk about mental health or even other people who sell brands similar to mine on my podcast. Those are easy, ideas right there. So it definitely helps to promote your business wherever it is. Some people use it to promote other people businesses because that's just, it's a really big marketing thing. That's the thing that's crazy to me. I kind of actually found out today that, again, with television. We already know who's in the dominant space when it comes to television, but also with podcasting, it is considered to be a white man's world. So it's time for us to come through and, kind of, tear up them spaces or whatever the case may be. So we don't have to, work on that no more. We can basically get all our people, your sisters, your brothers. I even say kids need to have a podcast because I taught kids, as you guys see our poster earlier in the week, I actually taught kids how to podcast from beginning to end. In just a couple of weeks, and they were so geeked and so proud to have their podcast. I could never cancel that class. Um, but it really helps kids not only communicate well, but teach them how to do research, and it teaches them how to speak. So don't ever fall back from even having letting your kids have a podcast, because I always think that's a really good idea, to the point where they even can create a podcast as a class project, or something of that nature. I always come up with random ideas, but there's always something that somebody's not doing that you can definitely be the first one to start doing. Audio is very convenient, like I said earlier. That's why it's so popular. And most people will do whatever they want to do while listening to it. One of the best things for me is I like to say that hosting a podcast is fun. It's a lot of people who wait years and years trying to get in a radio game. I know, yeah, that was me, just to make $20,000-$30,000 a year. That ain't no money. So if you really want to start getting your voice out there and being heard and get on a microphone, just start your own podcast. Do the same thing you think you would do, and those same conversations you think you would have if you had your own morning show. And as long as you think of it as something that's very important, it's going to be important to other people. That's how you have to treat it. I like to say, because I've been learning these things about, mindset. It's about having that podcast mindset. This is my podcast. This is something that I own. You own the audio. That stuff is copyright. It's like dropping an album. This stuff is yours. People are either going to pay to listen to it, or they're going to pay to be on your podcast. Your money, your podcast and your voice is worth something. There's people who are podcasting and their podcast is getting picked up on networks. Like, this is a real thing happening out here. They're getting picked up on Spotify networks, and some of them, as some of you guys know, they're getting picked up on on channels like Vice. So you never know where your podcast can go, especially if you stay in your space, stick to what you know, stick to your niche, and grow. And guess what? A podcast doesn't have to be 100% commitment. You can do whatever you want to do it for. And I'm gonna get to that in a second. So just in case you were like, oh, the industry is saturated. It's so many podcasts. Listen, let me let you understand something. I'm gonna show you these stats real quick. I'm not gonna show them to you. I'm just gonna tell you these stats real quick. And these are all real numbers. I just found these numbers today because they actually keep increasing over time. So back in 2016, there were only about 540,000 podcasts. Only 540,000. And even at that time, not everybody was recording consistently. As of January 2021, there are over 1.7 million podcasts with over 43 million episodes. No lie. Like, that's just the statistics from this January, and that's because they're counting, RSS feeds from all podcast platforms. So, 50% of all US homes are actually podcast fans. 50% of people don't even watch The Simpsons. So think about that, okay? Podcasting has probably the smallest industry of listeners and people who go into it. So you really don't have that much of a competition. And I'm gonna tell you, as soon as I'm done telling you these statistics, it's another really, really big reason why the competition for podcasting is small. Now, the age of listeners are anywhere between the ages of 12 and 34 years old. 48% of people who listen to podcasts, they are between the age of 12 and 34. That's that's the average, like millennial and whatever the next generation is called. X Gen, Y Gen, I don't know, TikTok Gen. I don't know what the next generation is called. But that tells you right there that that's a huge like number right there for the amount of households to actually listen to. And remember, you guys, these numbers, I'm only talking about America. I'm not even talking about the rest of the world. These numbers are only for America. The numbers and the statistics are different for every country, but I'm just talking about America alone. And trust and believe, because when blogging was a big thing, I got into blogging. People from other countries who probably don't even speak English will be listening to what you say. Whether it's because they like the information or they just trying to learn English. Just like people watch TV to learn English, they use podcasts to do the same thing. So a little bit more averages. The average person listens to 7 podcasts a week. They listen to 7 and they actually subscribe to 6. So that means over half of the podcasts that they listen to, they automatically subscribe to them. Like, yeah. Subscribe means that you want to be notified when, they post a new episode. Now, the reason why those numbers is important is because I can barely keep up with 7 television shows in 1 week, let alone, care to listen. But the reason why those numbers are like that is because I can't watch Grey's Anatomy and wash the dishes. I cannot clean and mop this floor and watch, Criminal Minds. You can't. You have to be right there in front of the TV. Even if you have your cell phone, you have to have that device in front of you. And that's not how I work with podcasting. And so that's why it's now. Now is the time for you to get in podcasting. One of the most important things is pod fading. Yes, you heard me right. You're like, what is pod fading? Trust and believe when I say pod fading is a thing. So when I told you all those podcasts that exist, do you know that over 50% of them do a little something we call pod fading? And you want to try to avoid this. And of course, I'm going to show you techniques and ways that you can avoid doing this. Pod fading is when you're super hyped up on creating a podcast, but at some point in your season or your recording and your process, you either lose motivation, your distance between each episode starts to get longer and longer, and you just stop posting. I came across so many podcasts and they ain't recorded since 2016. They ain't recorded since 2018. I can see one podcast, they recorded one episode and I ain't seen them since. So, as many podcasts as out there to read the RSS feed, over 50%. They said last year alone was 75%, but I'm gonna just say over 50% just to stay safe. Over 50% of them don't even podcast anymore. They haven't posted any fresh, episodes or anything of that nature. So we almost hitting that 20-minute mark. And of course, again, if you are late coming to this, is fine. If you are in the middle of the replay, that's fine too. Make sure you guys check the timeline and make sure you go ahead and click on that link to the syllabus. And I can see if you didn't click that link now. Yeah, I can see. If you're in this group and you want to start a podcast, I'm going to show you every single step, every single thing that you need to do to start a podcast. I'm including resources, videos you need to watch, steps you need to take, whatever it is. I'm going to help you create your own podcast. Okay. But basically, to get back to it, pod fading is basically it's the death of your episode. It's you losing that motivation. It's people out here that's had podcasts for over 20 years. I didn't even know podcasting was a thing when I was in high school, and it was. It's been around for a long time, and I wish that I knew about it when I was in high school. Can you imagine, like, the platform and the people I would know and people I would have met if I had been podcasting for 20 years? Hell, I would have been somebody's podcast producer somewhere if that was the case. Um, but yeah, you definitely want to try to avoid pod fading. And I'm definitely going to be giving you guys tips and tricks on how to avoid doing pod fading altogether. Now, you're probably wondering, like, you heard me drop some words. You're like, what is that word? What is a RS? So let me explain a little bit things for you. So a few definitions just so you can understand exactly how a podcast work. So basically, podcasts work on an RSS feed. That's how Apple know your podcast is there, Google Podcasts, all these places where you listen to podcasts, they do it by grabbing the RSS feed. So I'm using my hands because it took me a long time to understand what an RSS feed was, because back in the day, people used to always post a RSS feed when they had blogs. So basically, a RSS feed, they have been around since 1999. So you really don't really hear too much about it. But think of an RSS feed as an alert, a notification system. In every website, every blog, all your news sites, they have an RSS feed. And RSS basically stands for really simple syndication. I mean, who came up with that name? Really simple syndication. So, and it's a simple standardized content distribution method that basically helps you stay up to date with everything. So when podcasts came out, they was like, you know what? Let's just use RSS feeds. You got that one little link, and it's a link to your podcast, and as soon as they have that link, it basically get distributed everywhere. So we all know our most popular places that we listen to podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Google. A lot of people listen to podcasts on Spotify. All these other listening networks are starting to get podcasts, but they're just like grabbing the RSS feed, because once you created that RSS free feed is there for you to grab. It's free for you. So you can literally create a podcast company or podcast platform and just grab everybody RSS feed. Be like, yeah, download my app. I got podcasts on there too. But really all you did was grab the RSS feed. So that's how you got to think of a RSS feed. Basically, it's a way that you grab information off the internet so you can pull it all into one place. And that basically is what Apple Podcasts does. Now, let's get into a conversation about hosting and distribution, because a lot of people either they don't understand what that's all about, or they're not understanding what is the whole point of, like, they don't understand. Like, for a long time, a lot of people was like, oh, how you get your podcast on Apple? How you get your A lot of people don't know this and they don't really understand how it works, but when your podcast is on Apple Podcasts, it's up there for free. When it's on Google Podcasts, for free. Spotify, free. All this stuff is getting distributed everywhere for free. This is no longer 1985 when you had to try hard to try to get online or get on, I don't know, somebody's platform. You can literally create a podcast and everybody can have it available to them instantly right on their cell phone. So let me tell you the difference between hosting and distribution. Basically, a hosting platform is what you want to think about when you think about like website, like blogging, right? I like to kind of think of it as like a cloud, because a hosting platform is where you will actually upload all those episodes that you recorded. And once you upload them, they're like hosting it and they're holding it there, right? They create your little RSS feed, right? And then they telling everybody, hey, Apple, play this. Hey, Google, play this. Hey, everybody, come get my RSS feed. That's what they're doing. And I guess you could kind of look at it like, kind of like Spider-Man's webs everywhere. If you think about it, I'm thinking of this stuff on top of my head, y'all. So if you think about it like that, you upload your audio bites up to it, right? And they just distribute it to everybody. Next thing you know, you worldwide. I mean, you worldwide. You there. So um some of the most popular sites, I know a lot of people, when you first start researching Anchor, I mean when you first start researching podcasts, a lot of people say, oh, my podcast is on Anchor. Anchor right now is popular because Anchor is free. But just because it's free don't always mean it's great. So Anchor is one that you always hear. They probably spend the most money in advertising because they own your audio. Now, I recently been learning about this over the last few weeks, that owning your audio, owning your voice, owning something that you created as a content creator online is important. It just is. And so when you have a site like Anchor, when they are free, there are some stipulations in the contracts when you sign up for that you really don't own your audio. They can do whatever they want. You own it, of course. You could download it, distribute it, or whatever the case may be, but you don't really have the copyright per se to that audio or whatever. And if you're really tough about your ownership or whatever the case may be, you probably don't want to be on Anchor. I'm actually on Anchor. My first 2, 3 seasons of my current podcast, my first 3 seasons of my current podcast is actually on Anchor. But when you use an Anchor as just something to build up the popularity and build up your audience, it's a really good thing to use, especially when you're trying to start out and you starting out for free. Now, Anchor is free to use. Anchor also lets you make money from day one. You start monetizing from day one. They let you create an ad from day one. You make a little ad for Anchor, and then they distribute those ads in front of your podcast. You instantly you start getting paid for however many views. Really, really, kitty? I'm sorry, y'all. My cat is literally meowing like she's trying to say something. Anyway, so you basically upload your audios to there. You can upload your own icon, and they keep your analytics. Now, analytics is going to be a very deep topic. We're actually going to spend some time next week. 30 minutes talk about analytics and 30 minutes talking about microphone setups, and the different type of microphones or whatever the case may be. Now, I thought I was talking slow and I thought I was taking my time, but I guess I'm not. Anyway, so some of the other RSS feed distributors, also known as hosting platforms that I recommend, is other ones like Lipson, Blueberry, Podbean, Spreaker, and there's hundreds of them. I'm gonna have a link posted in the comments that's basically going to give you a full list. I ain't talking about just they first seven, because the first seven on this list, they just gonna tell you that they the best because they promoting them. Maybe two of them is the best, but the other ones after that are also really good too. Um, None of them act like Anchor. Anchor, I think right now is probably the only one that's the most hated because Spotify bought them. So you got to think Spotify is a distribution platform. Anchor is the actual hosting platform. If a distribution buys the, the hosting, that's like a record company owning your masters. That's exactly what it's like. That's one that makes them one in the same. That's saying Spotify owns your audio. Spotify does not own your audio when you have a podcast on these other networks. So that's important to understand the difference between a hosting platform and a distribution platform. Now, the distribution platform, some of the popular ones that you guys, of course, know about is Apple Podcasts. Apple Podcasts is number one. It has always been number one. And of course, it's number one because remember, what does podcast mean? iPod and broadcast. So, I mean, it pretty much got their name written all over it. So, Apple Podcast is really popular, of course, it's automatically on the phones of millions of iPhone users. And then you have, of course, Google Podcasts, Spotify. A lot of people are signed up for the Spotify app and Stitcher. So just imagine if you came up with your podcast and you have this particular niche. Again, I'm coming up with something off the top of my head. Let's say I owned a bakery and I wanted to start a podcast. I will start a podcast about, I don't know, a bakery. So I will start a podcast about starting a bakery business, scaling your business. I will talk about, the uniqueness of how baked goods is changing this or changing that, or how it's popular in different cities. Um, Stuff like that. You could come up with whatever desserts do for you. That could be your niche. You never know what somebody is looking for online. But if you think about these distribution programs, I mean, the distribution platforms, you have to think they already have an audience right there waiting for you. I started listening to podcasts because I just randomly heard about a podcast one day, and I heard about, what was it, Deuce and Amaro or something, and I end up seeing them on TV. But I'm like, ain't nobody got no vice. I ain't about to watch them if it's a podcast. Let me just listen to them. Then there's this other podcast that I can't think of right now, but it's a guy and a girl who hosted. They also got picked up by Vice, but it's an actual podcast. Because at the end of the day, I'm going to tell you, content is always king at the end of the day. And whether it's audio or video, it is wanted, it is needed. So when you have these platforms like Apple and Google Podcasts and Spotify and one Stitcher, I used to love me some Stitcher. I actually paid for them once. Stitcher because I wanted to hear all 200 episodes. All 200 episodes of the murder podcast I listened to. They've been on for like 2 years, and I wanted to go all the way to the beginning because I used to listen to murder podcasts when I was driving back and forth from school. So I mean, I've been listening to podcasts about 3-4 years now, and I've been creating podcasts for over 3 years now. So when I tell people I'm teaching this class and I'm doing it for free, I'm doing it because I feel like everybody need to be doing this. You can Google all the information all day, but some people need to have it one on one. Some people need to have it straight told to them in the face. Do this now. Wait and do this later. And this needs to be done by this day. And that's the only way you're going to get it done. Because at the end of the day, more people need to occupy this space and not just one type of person, not just one type of man. It needs to be more people on these platforms. So again, I'm going to tell you when those audiences are already set up, you really can't go wrong. The only thing that you have to worry about is figuring out how you're going to promote your podcast and how you're going to tell people about it. And lucky you, you're in this group. I'm also going to show you different ways that you're going to promote your podcast on either social media networks or on a website. Because again, I've done it already. I've done it before. I already have experience in it, and I'm a self-proclaimed guru at it. Whatever you need to know about podcasting, I do it. I tell you all about it. If I've already did the months and months and months of research, you don't have to do it. When I first dropped my first podcast, and it's still on Apple Podcasts to this day, I was one of those people who pod faded. Like, no lie, I pod faded. I researched how to podcast for 4 months. And this is no lie, because the Christmas before Chris bought me this whole microphone set. That's how excited I was about podcasting. And this ain't the only one. I have 2 of these microphones, y'all. Okay. I have a whole switchboard. I got the little system that's distributed to this. I pay now $55 a month for a whole Adobe software because they took away my student discount. But um like, I researched to the T. I'm talking from start to beginning to audio editing, taking out background noise. Everything that I'm going to teach you, I know it because I spent 4 months, because I was unemployed at the time, right before I actually started working at the radio station when I graduated college back in 2000, when I graduated undergrad back in 2017. That's when I started really going hard and research for 4 months. I'm gonna say that again. I researched for 4 months, and I'm about to show y'all how to do all this in 4 weeks for free. Like, what more do you want? Like, so I'm telling you guys, it wasn't until 2018 that I finally got buckled down and was like, okay, I'm ready. I got the microphones. I got this. I got that. And I didn't even have to do all that. I didn't need to have to do that. If I wanted to start a podcast, I could have just went on and started. It's a very a very, very good like quote that I love. And I was listening to it today when I was listening to Pat Flynn. Pat Flynn is on YouTube. He's like a marketer research person. And that quote was, be a disaster before a master. And be a disaster before a master. That is something you need to learn. That is something you need to learn. Stick to your head, because the reason why most people don't do things is because they too worried about it being perfect first. And when you're worrying about stuff being perfect before actually doing it, you know what happened? You're just never going to do it. You're just going to be like, oh, next time, or oh, this time. Now is the time to start your podcast. I'm teaching you how to do it for free. Whatever ever questions you got, you can always inbox me for them. So the last thing we're going to talk about is the format. So again, I posted a list of these different formats throughout the week, and I had a few comments about the formats, and why do you want to start a podcast. Now, the format of a podcast is it's about 6 or 7 different types of podcasts. Some of the 7 most common podcast formats, I'm going to drop a link to that in the comments. But the 7 most common ones are solo, interview, co-host, roundtable, variety, a narrative, a fiction, or you can mix all the two. And when I say mix all the two, listen, if somebody cancel on you, you can record an episode by yourself. If you can, I don't know, get your neighbor or get your friend or whoever relates to your podcast and you want to interview them, you can interview them on some episodes and be back by yourself next week. You want to do a roundtable? Maybe you want to get 5 or 6 people on the Zoom call, and y'all all on the Zoom call, and y'all having a conversation. And next week you back solo. There is no absolute rules to podcasting, except you can't. It's not a radio show. You can't be like, what up, y'all? It's the such and such podcast. Now we about to play Nicki Minaj's first hit. It ain't a radio program. You cannot play music. You cannot play other people's copyrighted works. This is not that. It's just not that. This is all about talking, conversations, or whatever the case may be. Now, you can't have music as far as the free music sources. Again, I'm gonna show you how to do that. I'm gonna show you how to where you can get free music from. And I say free, I mean free, because all the music I use now is free, and that music be banging. So don't think that if it's free, it ain't good music, because most people that's not like mainstream, they had to start somewhere, and they started with freely distributed music. So I'm gonna show you guys where you can get your free music. I'm even gonna show you guys how to make your audio beds. So once you create an audio bed, you literally just gotta drop your podcast episode on that audio bed, and you good to go, you know. But yeah, those are the formats. You can choose one format to stick to, or you can mix any of the two. It's up to you. It's your world, squirrel. Everybody else just wish they could sit next to you. You get what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying? So again, everything that we went over today, I tell you guys why and what's the purpose of having a podcast, the length. You want to think about that length that you're going to make the podcast, like how many minutes and time commitment that you really want to make to this podcast. I also gave you statistics. So stop thinking that this is a phase. It's been around for 20 years. Stop thinking that it's saturated, because it's not even still. You Nobody says, oh, TV is saturated, oh, sitcoms is saturated. No, you still watching them. Movies is saturated. No, no, it's not saturated. You still have time, you still have a space for it. You can still become super great. And I just hope that you guys follow through and you make these podcasts. And if you know anybody else that's trying to make a podcast, tell them to come on through, answer the questions, and come on through. They still got time to catch up. We're about to get this thing going right now. We talked about pod fading. So important to try to stay away from pod fading. We don't want your podcast to die. We want it to live. The only time that it's okay to take long breaks from podcasts is if you actually say it. So let's say you've been recording for 5 weeks, 10 weeks straight. All right, guys, episode Episode 10, season 1 is complete. You guys, we're taking a summer break and we'll be back in September. That's okay, because you've taken those seasonal breaks. You've told your audience, you've told your fans when you're going to come back to your podcast, and you can spend that time either relaxing or banking episodes for season 2. So that's just a tiny little snippet of the conversation we're going to have when we talk about how to avoid pod fading again. If you scroll up into the comments, you will see there is a link to pod fading. And we talked about hosting and distribution and knowing the difference, because that's very important that you know the difference between those two. They are not the same. Apple Podcast is not they're not hosting your podcast. They're just distributing it. That's all they're doing. They the delivery guy. They just the delivery guy. They Amazon. They not the actual people that's hosting your platform. And last but not least, we talked about the different formats of your podcast. So tonight was just a quick overview. I'm going to leave the last 10 minutes open for questions. Anybody have any questions? Even if you're watching the replay, I will come back into the comments later and answer questions. But before I get to those questions, we're going to talk about your homework. Yes, I said homework. You got to have some homework, because if you don't have some homework, who's going to show you, who's going to hold you accountable? You said you wanted to start a podcast. You said you was ready. New year, new you, right? It's 2021. What is you doing? Where's your podcast mindset? This is it. So this is your homework, and you write this down. If you ain't wrote nothing else down during this whole 44 minutes I've been talking, you want to write this down. Your homework is have your name complete and finalize your niche. Now, you want to start making sure. Now, last Saturday, I said y'all start thinking about, your podcast and thinking about what topic you can make 3 episodes on, at least 3 episodes on. So now it's time to get in the mud and start walking. Have your name complete by next Saturday. If you come up with the name, post it on a wall. You're going to get your clap hands. When you come up with that name, speak it out. You have to, what they call it, manifest the name of your podcast. Know that it's happening. Know that it's you about to do this. It's going down. So when you come up with that name of your podcast, you write it down. You could write it down on the Facebook wall, and I'm gonna be like, woohoo, good job. You write it down in your podcast notebook. I'm not just telling y'all to get podcast notebook. I have a podcast notebook. It's right here. I write all the notes, and it literally is my podcast notebook that I write everything in. Just one little notebook from the dollar store where I write all my notes in. So have your name complete and finalized by next Saturday, because that's going to be important, because it goes along with next week's lesson. Create a new email, or you can use your own. Now, the reason why I'm telling you guys to create a new email, or if you don't want to create a new one, because if you're like me, you probably got 12 of them. I do. Because I like to use the email hard drive, because I need the hard drives, and I like to save all my pictures and have all my audio or whatever. But the reason why you want to create a new email is because every RSS feed, every podcast is attached to an email address, and that email address is very important when it comes to creating your podcast, especially when you sign up for some of these websites, these podcast hosting websites. You need to make sure that you have that email address. Even when you want to, ask people, want to be a guest on my show, or let's be on my show, you can make sure that you create professional emails that you can send out to people, and they know exactly who you are, or whatever the case may be. Again, I'm going to teach you guys how to do that too. Even probably create a template for how to request people to be your guests on your show. Very simple, easy stuff. Again, I know it because I've done it. I know it because I did it. I know it because I am it. This is what I do. So create a new email. You can decide if you're going to use your own, write that down, and then decide which distributor you're going to go to. Now, ain't no judgment. If you want to use Anchor, I'm here with you, boo. Use Anchor. It is free. You can start monetizing. We wasn't even promoting our podcast, y'all. No lie. And we made $150. $150. My podcast, that podcast I started with my friends. We started that in February of 2019. Listen to what I'm saying. We started in February of 2019. Our last episode was September 9th, 2020, and I barely promoted it. I do have an Instagram page for it, Kisses and Conversations Podcast, if you guys don't know or haven't heard it before. But we took a winter, a summer break, a spring break. I made a summer series, like $150, and we barely did anything. But we were in a particular niche, a podcast about dating for Black men, where we talked to Black men and interviewed Black men and had conversations like that. So anything can happen. So if you want to do Anchor, you could do Anchor. If you want to do Podbean, do that. If you want to do Spreaker, I have Spreaker also because I will use Spreaker as just a backup because Spreaker is what I used when I had my first podcast. I didn't know about Anchor. I heard it was free, but I was like, nah. But I started Spreaker and I actually paid $6 a month for Spreaker because Spreaker has the most authentic numbers when it comes to how many times your podcast has been listened to, how many times it's been downloaded, and how many times, I don't know, somebody watched it for the first 4 minutes and then like didn't watch it for the next 8 minutes or whatever the case may be. And so I like to use Spreaker, a little investment because they have the full platform, and Spreaker even allows you, I don't know what the other platforms do, but I'm telling you what I know. And Spreaker, when you upload a podcast episode to Spreaker, it automatically distributed to a YouTube page. So even if you wanted to record yourself doing a podcast, that's fine. You only want to use the actual recording of snippets, but that audio is automatically going to be distributed to YouTube, and that's the best part about Spreaker. So I use Spreaker, which is a paid platform, for $6 a month, but I also have used Anchor, which is a free one. I recently just got finished teaching my Uncle Sire how to start his new podcast because he had a podcast for a really, really, really long time, and it was called Running a Dream. But because he didn't know too much about podcasting, all he was doing was recording the episodes and he giving them to this guy who said he was his friend. Don't worry, I'm gonna start the podcast for you. Give me your audio settings, and we'll created a Facebook group around it. Had like 400 or 500 Facebook friends. I'm gonna show you guys how to do that. The importance of Facebook groups around a particular niche podcast. I'm gonna teach you guys that too. And so he don't know how much money he made from that podcast. It had over 4,000 downloads, and he don't even know the analytics, the other analytics for that podcast, or how much money he possibly made from that podcast. And I promise you, the guy he gave it to probably was taking that money like, woo, this my little lunch, or I'm going shopping with this money, or whatever. So it's important to get the understanding, get the knowledge before you jump right into something. But now my Uncle Sire is starting over. I completely taught him how to edit audio over the computer, and how to make his icon and all this other stuff. And so you can learn it too. Either you can use a whole bunch of YouTube services, or you can pay somebody to teach you how to do it one-on-one. So again, your homework is have your name complete. What is the name of your podcast? Have your name complete by next week on Saturday. Have your name. And create a new email, or decide which email address that you're going to start using for your podcast. Maybe it's a dormant one, but make sure you have that email address because they're going to be sending you stuff. When your podcast get approved on Apple Podcasts, they're going to be sending you stuff to kind of tell you information and analytics. And make sure you decide on who's going to be your distributor. If you forgot what I meant by distributor, that's the Lipson, the Blueberry, Podbean, Spreaker, Anchor. Those are the list right there. You can see them at the bottom. Those are the list of the different ones. And you can also click that link that was in the comment if you are interested in other podcast hosting platforms. They could be anywhere from free to $15 an hour. And the more you pay for them, the more they have either analytics or they have some type of distribution specials or whatever the case may be. You will find all that information out in your research. But I'm going to go ahead and spend the last few minutes doing a few questions and answers. The last note, while you are completing your homework, you guys definitely want to make sure that you ask questions throughout the week. No question is a stupid question. So whatever you ask me, I am going to answer you on the wall. Remember, this group is private. So everything in this group, it cannot be shared onto Facebook. Only people who see the stuff in this group is the people who work behind the scenes at Facebook and you. Nobody else sees anything that's posted in this group but you guys. So I also want you guys to just kind of brainstorm. After you didn't got your first part of your homework done, kind of start visualizing what you think you want your podcast icon to look like, because I'm going to be posting some mini videos and mini tutorials throughout the week to make sure you guys look at those, and even going to do a live how-to session, because some people will be like, yeah, okay, I'm going to watch that link, and you never will. Listen. We got to be accountable, okay? So, and think about how long you want your podcast to be, and actually think about the things you're going to be listening, because next week I don't want you to think that you got to spend hundreds and thousands of dollars. I'm going to be posting later on this week. I actually made a full file for everybody to listen to. I recorded some audio with my cell phone, and the difference between recording with my cell phone in an open space or inside a closet is a thing, y'all. So we're gonna talk about audio quality, the different types of microphones you can have, and things you want to start off with. Because remember what I said, y'all. Be a disaster before the master. So if recording from your cell phone is what you have to start off doing, then that's fine. I'll show you how to do that too. But the most important thing is you want to kind of start brainstorming. Um, when you think about what the name of your podcast is, can you make 12 episodes? That's one episode a month. Can you make 24 episodes? That's about, one episode every 2 weeks, and not counting your spring break. You want to make sure that whatever you decide that you want to podcast about, that you can make enough episodes for it so you won't start pod fading. And even if it's just a podcast where you like, I got a lot to say and I'm a mama, and or I work in the medical field and I got a lot to say, then that's fine. Just come up with your episodes, boo. That's all you gotta do. So do your homework. I'm gonna be posting throughout the week, reminding you guys on Wednesday, what's your homework, y'all? And I am going to look in see if we got any questions or comments yet. So if we don't have any questions or comments, hopefully you guys watch this whole video. If you are late watching this, then of course I will be here. Oh, am I hot? Maybe it's the lights, y'all, because it's super bright in here. Anyway, um, if there are any questions or comments, whether it's later on tonight or tomorrow, whoever is going to watch the replay, it doesn't matter. I will be answering the questions and comments. We're going to make sure we end this on time, right on time, and I'm gonna have this whole broadcast to end it, and I will see you guys. I don't know. I'll wait like 30 seconds, but I know it's Saturday night. Y'all all probably like, it's Saturday. Anyway, I'm tired myself, but I was glad to be able to tell you guys this information today. I will see you guys next Saturday, 8 o'clock, same time, same place, and we are out. Goodbye.